I'm not going to bite. 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 Not bite. Not bite. Don't take. Don't take. Not bite. Not bite. Don't take. Don't take. Bite. 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 Take. 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 Tipping point. 'Tis the season to play victim. Your host, Mike Boyle. And a funny thing happened on the way to the station today. This show was not supposed to be part of the program. But I had a bit of an epiphany on the way here. And it reminded me of a scene that was to be found in a wonderful film by Wim Wenders called Wings of Desire. And within that film, there was a scene at a club in Berlin where Nick Cave was ready to get on stage, and he kept saying to himself, I'm not going to sing this song. I'm not going to sing this song. I'm not going to sing this song. And what did he do? Of course, he got on the stage and he sang that song. And I understand that feeling, because on the one hand, we are trying to repress certain feelings. We are afraid of that vulnerability that comes out when we start talking about things that are very too close to us, especially at a certain period of time. But the question is to what degree we are capable of overcoming that. And so that's exactly what took place on the way to the station. And thank goodness that I am agile. And I was able to put these things together, something that has been brewing for a while. And so I put together, let's call it a Christmas da capo, compiled of 3 parts, and it's based upon a story, a fictitious character. And I would say, let's get started. In the heart of bustling Harmonyville, there lived Emily, a compassionate soul propelled by the sincere wish to give back to society. As she shared her good fortune with those in need, word of her generosity spread, and the initially hesitant requests for help transformed into a flood. Emily, driven by a genuine desire to make a positive impact, found herself ensnarled in a web of mental anguish. The once joyful act of giving became a punishing ordeal, as the relentless stream of appeals weighed heavily on her psyche. Overwhelmed and mentally drained, Emily grappled with the self-imposed punishment, where the very goodness she sought to impart became a source of profound emotional distress. The drama triangle unfolded, casting her as the reluctant victim of her own benevolence. Emily, burdened by the unintended consequences of her generosity, yearned to break free from the mental anguish that had eclipsed the joy of her initial altruistic endeavors. So I ask you all, does this story sound familiar? And this truly is the season when I think about, I would say starting about a month ago, maybe even longer, all of a sudden I start getting mails from organizations that I forgot that I was actually involved in some fashion. And they start with their story and all the good things that they do. And then here comes the punch, but we are losing funds and we really need your help. And please give now, and we have people who will double the donation that you have actually submitted. And so you read that, and then you park it wherever you might decide to park it. And then you get another mail 2 days later from the same group stating, "Oh, you remember that mail? I just wanted to remind you that we sent you a mail a couple days ago. Our situation hasn't improved, and we still have that donor who's willing to match your grant, so please give now." So perhaps by that point in time, you found a special place to park that mail, in a place that you don't need to see it again. But no, it doesn't stop. And you find yourself being inundated that the vast majority of the mails that you're getting are following a similar storyline, and the call to action seems to be about the same. And the more dramatic the narrative has been displayed, the better they feel their chances are of you coughing up. Now, I suspect that some of you are going to call me the Grinch. But the real problem is for those of us who have a true pleasure in giving to others. And just to be clear here, giving is not transactional. Giving means that you give not because you have to, but because you want to. And the real danger is, of course, when that giving is no longer free. A winter's day in a deep and dark December. I am alone, gazing from my window to the streets below on a freshly fallen, silent shroud of snow. I am a rock. I am an island. And what we're talking about here, folks, is I have a new acronym for us entering 2024. It's called GAO, G-A-A-O, and it represents the phrase giving as an obligation. Because when this becomes an obligation, then it's no longer giving, not as I define the term giving to be. It becomes something much different. And very often, there are all kinds of mental games that are being played. And that's where I would like to spend the vast majority of the show, talking about 3 different scenarios, still staying with Emily. And so starting with scenario number 1, it will be the initial request. So the individual very possibly will be very reluctant in reaching out to Emily tied to this issue, and very possibly there will be no proper request, but rather the situation will be presented to Emily, who wants to do something good and sees a friend in need, understands that giving to others is actually a payback to us in the form that we're building something much bigger than ourselves. Within these cosmos, this ecosystem that we call society, in this ideal world that we have, we think that by giving without making it transactional, without a payback, means that when you are in need, you have a network of somebody who will be able to help you. And that's really the motivation, because it's all part of we and not me. So in this particular case, we're talking about financial assistance. So Emily says, well, I have some additional cash and I can lend this cash to this individual, and yeah, don't worry, whenever you have the cash, you can pay me back. There's no rush. And the impetus can be manifold. It could either be some bills that need to be paid, or some sort of basic necessities. And I'm not discounting that the individual who's asking for this help really does need the help. So Emily has given this other person what she considers to be a loan, and stating that it makes no difference when you pay her back. And then so we continue. But it doesn't stop, because this individual always seems to have problems. And Emily doesn't feel that she is entitled to give advice to others about how they live their life, because basically Emily relishes the freedom in that she lives her life the way that she wants to. But she has some very clear opinions about the ways that these others are managing their affairs. So the word gets out. Emily's generosity does not stay a secret. And so the word spreads about her willingness to help. And so now it's not just one person, but there are multiples that are coming to Emily asking for help. And of course, those that have received help from Emily, they feel emboldened by her past assistance and come more and more to ask for assistance or financial help primarily. And so within the scenario, at first they do not ask for money. But then Emily offers to give them money because Emily feels that she can afford it. And in the beginning, those individuals say, oh, we'll pay you back next week. We'll pay you back next week. And then Emily would say, oh, don't stress yourself. Whenever you have a chance, don't worry about it. But now the barn door has been opened. The barn door has been opened. And what was once perhaps not even a direct request, now they become direct requests. Say, Emily, I have another problem. I have more bills that need to be paid. And my kids are need to go to camp, and I don't have the money to pay for camp. So can you lend me some more money? So Emily is a little bit surprised by this request, but she says, okay, good, I'll go ahead and help you again. And then they say, oh, thank you, Emily, you're a star. Thanks again. And you know how this story is going to go. So months pass and you don't even hear from these people because a new relationship has been created. It's no longer friendship. You are becoming the benefactor. And so Emily's on holidays, and then she gets a message from one of these people and say, "Oh, Emily, can you lend me another 500 euros?" And now Emily is thinking, so this is not going to come to an end, is it? So Emily decides to ignore the message and feels really bad the whole time. She really feels bad because she doesn't want to leave people in the lurch. But at the same time, she feels that people are taking advantage of her. So let's continue. So these demands are escalating. And the amounts that they're asking for become more and more. And the types of requests become varied, meaning that they will not necessarily always be tied to money. And Emily will think, oh, well, if I have something I'm not using, then why don't I just go ahead and lend it to him? Because it's no skin off my nose, and actually I want to help people. And of course, to explain that to others that might be using the same things within the collective becomes a little bit complicated. So Emily thinks, well, when's a good time for me to actually spill the beans and state that I lent something to somebody? And the reaction will often be, well, Emily, why did you do that? Or, well, you already decided to lend it to this individual, so there's not much I could do about it. So when are we supposed to get it back? What? When? And so Emily's hoping the whole time that nothing happens to those things that have been lent out. And Emily doesn't realize the hardship that it actually caused. And Emily's starting to think, so is giving supposed to feel like this? Welcome to Radio Tipping Point. Our show today is titled, "'Tis the Season to Play Victim." And this is a Christmas da capo. And we're telling the story of a fictitious character by the name of Emily and how she deals with her need or her desire to give, and how that becomes exploited. So this continues, and the number of recipients who are profiting from Emily's largesse become larger and larger. And Emily starts to see a common pattern in the ways that these individuals are basically taking advantage of her. Because any pretense becomes less and less the longer that Emily continues on this path. And so now she has a collection. She sees that this pattern keeps playing over and over again. And this starts to become a real burden for Emily. But it doesn't stop there. Because then Emily starts to notice that there is some sort of emotional manipulation truly playing out here. They will continue, even if Emily ignores their messages, they don't stop. Because they feel that they have Emily in the palm of their hands, right? Because they know that Emily is sensitive. They know that Emily is caring. They know that Emily will feel guilty if she's not capable of helping the others. So these guilt trips and the corresponding emotional appeals continue. It becomes a vicious cycle. And it becomes incessant. So what does Emily end up doing? Emily believes that the only real solution is to go into hiding. Yes, Emily has decided to go into hiding. And the problem is that reaction from Emily is not just towards these individuals who are taking advantage of her largesse. No, it becomes a cloud that hangs over Emily in virtually all of her relationships that she has with others, and has brought Emily into depression. And those individuals who are taking advantage of Emily's generosity, they smell blood. Yes, they smell blood. And now they start playing this card that's even worse than giving as an obligation. They go straight to the heart of the drama triangle, because they are inferring if Emily is not capable of helping them anymore, then Emily is the fault of their demise. That means they have taken on the role of victimhood. And Emily, all of a sudden, has become the perpetrator. Yes, Emily, the perpetrator. It's a role that Emily does not like. She does not like that role at all. So Emily starts to truly question humanity. She starts to question if there's anything positive to be found within society. And of course, within a situation like that, Emily, and I think you would understand that Emily is truly distraught, right? Emily is distraught. And she feels that she's been put into a trap, and she does not know how to get out. Because it's not in Emily's nature to be withdrawn. But she feels that she has no choice. And I truly believe in the story of Emily. It's a classic example of what we see within the concept of the drama triangle. Just to make sure that we're all up to speed. The drama triangle, well, you know what a triangle is. And so if you can create an image in your mind while I tell you the story of these three roles that are to be found within the drama triangle, you have the key player, who is the victim. You have the perpetrator, and then you have the savior. Now, very often within this triangle, the savior plays this role because the savior feels that he or she has a duty to the others. And so the victim plays off the perpetrator, and the perpetrator can take on different forms. And if we stay with this story of Emily, then the perpetrator is actually all these people that are expecting money from whatever source they may be. And very possibly they see that Emily has the savior quality, whereas actually Emily does not want to get involved in other people's affairs, but she feels a sense of duty to help others simply because she thinks that in this world where we're not able to help each other, then what is the purpose? And so Emily's not trying to save anyone. She just wants to help people. And following that definition, the giving is not expecting something in return. Well, then this continues, as you might have picked up in the story, that the individuals take on this role of victim more and more and more. And then they try to push Emily into this role of being the savior. And this contradicts Emily's view of what giving should be all about. Because if giving is freely means if you do not want to give, you don't give. And in Emily's mind in this world, if we have everyone thinking the same way, that they give without expecting something in return, then she believes that most of our problems in this world could be solved. But of course, it doesn't quite work out that way. So as this story unfolds, we see that those victims, because if Emily's not going to play the role of the savior, then let's go ahead and put Emily as the perpetrator. Emily is the problem. Emily is the reason why they are in this situation that they've landed up in. And so Emily doesn't want to play savior, but she definitely doesn't want to be perpetrator. And so she feels that the only real solution is to go into hiding. Now, there's a book that I talk about quite often in the show. And I feel that, again, it plays a role within the story. And in fact, it's created this whole complex that raises its head in a very profound way, especially at Christmas time. And the book I'm talking about is Bowling Alone from Robert Putnam. And Putnam talks about the dissolution of society or the community. Instead of individuals participating in activities, in joining clubs, and getting to know their neighbors, and getting to know people that they probably wouldn't have anything to do with otherwise. That the time constraints become larger. Through our affluence, it's so much easier to give money than to donate time to help others. And so we find ourselves being disjointed from those people around us because we don't know them. We have nothing to do with them. We have others that are taking care of their needs. And the most poignant part of this book is to be found within the title. So if you can imagine somebody who's in a bowling alley and they're bowling by themselves because they actually have no other contacts. And they consider that to be a normal state. So let's stay with the story of the NGOs, piggybacking on this concept that Putnam talks about. And we'll stay with Emily. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, the mails that you get, or maybe the telephone calls you might get, where Emily thought that she was doing something good in donating to various causes because Emily thinks, well, actually, I have it pretty good, and there are a lot of people who don't have it as good as I do, so why can't I give them something to help? And if she's thinking, well, if everybody gives a little, then very possibly the problem might be solved. But what Emily doesn't realize, that this becomes a complex, and I'm sure I'm not going to make any friends with this comment, but I'm going to let it fly anyways, that you will have organizations that the reason to be is because others suffer. So in other words, if people are no longer suffering, then they have no reason to be. So it's in their interest that people suffer. Now, they might not necessarily performing these activities overtly. In other words, they are not thinking, oh, well, let's make sure they suffer even more. But very often, the organizations become a means to an end. And that means that donation that people like Emily are making don't actually go to those individuals who are suffering, or part of it will go to them. But in that end-all and be-all of those organizations who are making the pitch, well, that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, and they need more money to make more appeals. And then after all, they're no different than any corporation where the marketing budget is probably about 30-40%, meaning that when you and I and Emily give money to these organizations, it's actually funneling the marketing machine. That's what it's doing. It's funneling the marketing machine. And so you can imagine, for somebody like Emily, that she will give to the organization. The organization will make it very easy and say, well, we'll just go ahead and take automatic payments from you. And through that natural desire for convenience that seems to be a bedrock of our society today, Emily agrees. So then Emily's giving without even realizing what she's giving, and this will go on for a long time. But of course, the NGOs are existing within an ecosystem. And then all of a sudden, Emily will get a message from another organization that she's never heard from before. She's never heard of them. But they will tell her their story. And the pattern of the narrative will be very similar. They'll talk with a problem statement, and they will then talk about how they alleviate the pain of that specific afflicted group. And then they will get to the point of saying, well, but always the phrase, times like these, whatever that actually means, times like these, means that it becomes more expensive. We have suffered under inflation, which I'm sure they do. I'm not discounting that. But then they will say, your help will alleviate pain for all of these people. And they will make it very easy for Emily to contribute. And let's hope that Emily is able to hold herself back, but you see so much suffering, and so Emily thinks, well, why not? I can afford it. Here, well, let's go ahead and let me give this to you, and I wish you well. But now we get on a philanthropic feeding frenzy, where the requests don't stop. They keep coming, they keep coming, they keep coming. And after a while, Emily becomes very desensitized. Emily does not allow herself to be affected by all of these requests. So when she receives something in the mail, snail mail, she doesn't even open it, she throws it straight away. Or if she receives a mail from an organization, it goes straight into the trash can. And we know, especially this time of the year, we talk about suffering. And please don't get me wrong. People are suffering. But the real problem is that once we only concentrate at a certain time of the year, around this time of the year, of actually trying to relieve the symptoms. And that means that the other, let's say 330 days in the year, they're not on anybody's radar screens. Well, perhaps they are on others' radar screens, but they're not on our radar screens. And that means that, lo and behold, another year has passed. And we start getting these requests one more time. And we're talking about dire straits for a number of individuals. That is not to be discounted. But what never is discussed, or very, very seldom, there is no such thing as a never. There are always some exceptions. But the rule of thumb, the heuristic, is that we only concentrate on the symptoms and we don't look at the root cause. And wouldn't it be great, after we've gotten through addressing the symptoms and understanding that these are they should be short-term needs, which should give us the opportunity to look at the medium long-term needs, basically looking at the root cause, that we can use January as root cause month. How about that? Let's start a new movement. Let's call January root cause month. And what we will do come 1st of January, especially when we go through all those New Year's resolutions, let's make collectively a decision that we will start looking at the root causes of these problems, and we will dedicate our efforts the entire year of addressing the root causes, so that when it comes December of next year, we do not have to consider the needs of others and yet again address the symptoms. What do you think of that? Is that a good idea? I have my books and my poetry to protect me. I am shielded in my armor, hiding in my room, safe within my womb. I touch no one, and no one touches me. I am a rock. I am an island. Now we're going to do a little bit of a deviation. Let's stay with Emily. I think Emily's got enough of our attention. I'd like to stay with a revelation that I've gone through this year. In that giving, being very cognizant of the message that people like Robert Putnam brought, understanding that time is the most valuable asset that we can give to each other, that I would look for those root causes. I would donate my time to help others to alleviate those root causes so that we can all be spared come December of having to go through the giving as an obligation routine. Or at least give us the opportunity to relish in that of what we were able to accomplish, and not just temporarily relieving those of their anguish, but banning it for good. Now, wouldn't that be a positive goal? So that was my impetus going into 2023. And actually earlier, but I was fortunate that I could spend a little bit more time in 23 in offering whatever experience or expertise I might have to help others and mentor others so that we can actually start addressing these root causes. But I realized there was a serious problem in this model. And I'll keep all the organizations as anonymous. But there was one that I turned to in January. And I said, I'd like to help. And I explained the experience that I had, or I've had, and how I felt that that was an expertise that they don't have. And I would be very interested in performing these actions for them pro bono. And then they said, that's great, that's wonderful, blah, blah, blah. And then you never hear from them. And I'm thinking the whole time, they're complaining continuously that they don't have enough money, that they need all kinds of help, and then you go to offer them help, and they don't even bother to respond to you. And I'm thinking, this is really strange. And then I started to realize that these organizations are in many respects not too much different than the corporations that I would either work for or would be servicing, where you would have different departments, meaning that A does not talk to B, and A might not necessarily see the connection between A and B, or B seeing the connection between B and A. And they might be scratching their heads and saying the whole time, how come we don't have enough money? How come we do not have enough support? Whereas maybe they just need to get their act together. And I'm afraid that this is not a seldom occurrence. I see this quite often. But there was another realization I came to. So I thought, okay, so I'm starting to understand how all this stuff works. So I thought I would help. There was another organization. I thought I would help them by picking up on A and B and saying, oh, by the way, I talked to B, and I just wanted to let you know that I've talked to B, and I'm willing to help. And that might not work the first time. It might not work the second time, but after a while, like when you bang your head against the wall, you start to realize that it hurts, and then you decide, well, maybe I should just go ahead and stop. But there was one particular case this year where I actually did finally get an action. It was one of those, well, I'm going to try one last time, and if they don't respond, then I'm writing them off. Well, I actually did get a response, and perhaps maybe in the tone, because I've noticed that the tone that I write this correspondence becomes more and more direct because I see what's happening. And very possibly, or most probably, because I feel I have nothing to lose, and if they're not interested, well, then that was their choice. There was one organization that I started doing some mentoring, and I'm even more direct than I think I've ever been. And I said, you need this help, and I'll tell you why you need this help, because this is an experience you don't have. You are looking at things from a certain perspective, but there are other perspectives. There are perspectives that are actually much more beneficial. And what I'd like to do is help you understand that this can work differently. This could work much more efficiently. This could be much more productive for you. I believe in your cause, and I want to help you. But this is the problem that I have seen. And this is very much tied to a subject that I talk about quite often in the show. And apart from the transactional nature in the way that we treat things, and it would be a lie for me to say that I was not afflicted by this mental disease. But thank goodness I was able to free myself of it. But individuals think, well, they're getting paid. They do not control what takes place in the time that they are working for an employer. So basically, they sell their time to an employer and they receive remuneration. And it's a quid pro quo arrangement. And they see the value of their time is directly related to the money that they get from whatever the organization is. And that's the way things are. So if we follow that analogy, and if we realize that individuals believe that the only valuable time is that is receiving some sort of remuneration, then what would be the opposite? Of course, well, if you don't receive any money for it, then it's not valuable. So now this was my revelation this year, that because they don't care about what's taking place in the time that they are spending whatever on this, I'm going to say on the job, because they don't care, they don't respect your time. Now you're going in there, you have a purpose. You, in comparison to them, you don't have to do anything, but you want to do something. And this is going back to this question of giving without expecting something in return. And so you go to visit an organization, and either they have you waiting for 15, 20, 30 minutes while they talk to everybody, and they think, well, that's fine. You could just wait until we're ready. And then they will go on whatever, not really concentrating on the issues that need to be addressed. And you'll be there sitting and listening to all this. And you think, okay, well, maybe today was an aberration. Perhaps it doesn't necessarily work that way. And then you try the next week. And then you get to the door and the door is locked. And you call this individual and they said, oh, I'm running late today. And so you wait 15 minutes in front of the door. And they don't even apologize. They open the door. And then they start with this pontification again. And in the meantime, you've spent the whole week trying to figure out ways for them to solve their problems, and you come to the conclusion that maybe you want to solve their problems more than they want to solve their problems themselves. But the real issue, folks, is that they do not value your time. They do not value your time. And the reason why they don't value your time is because they don't value their own time. I've really come to this conclusion. They don't value their own time. So they figure, well, I'm getting paid whether I do anything or not. And they probably think, well, you have nothing else better to do, so what's the big deal? And this is basically the situation that you run across. So you go from one organization to the next that really do need help. They need help. We need to create a community here. A community is not based upon some sort of transactional model where the reason why we do things is because we're getting paid, which is way too linear. Well, way too linear for me, that's for sure. But that means that we're not capable of understanding the complexity that which is to be found within our community and the way that it's set up. Which also leads me to the conclusion, if we're not capable of understanding the complexity, then how, in God's name, are we ever going to get this one solved? How are we going to get this one solved? Well, one thing's for sure. We all have a choice, and doing nothing is always an option. And because, and I didn't even think of this one before, this being the last show for me in 2023, that it's almost New Year's resolution time. Well, I think I've already started with that, and that we make January root cause month, where we concentrate on identifying and working at the root cause. And we know that the root cause takes a lot of time, is very complicated, and requires a lot of research, and it requires a lot of trial and error. And it leads us to a lot of learning. And if done well, it fulfills the need of autonomy and mastery. But I wish for all of you that you are able to use your time wisely, find out what your passions are, don't get discouraged in giving, because we know within that great cosmos, if we are all thinking about each other and figuring out ways to give, then we can accomplish a lot more than we certainly can do as a collection of individuals. And let's create that world that we give because we want to, and not because it's expected of us, or that we expect something in return. Or, getting back to the acronym of 2023, GO. Giving as an obligation. Let's go ahead and figure out ways to park that one for good. And I've reached the 2-minute warning. And I thank you for letting me indulge in these subjects where I hope that you're able to find some added value, and that together that we can create that world that we want to live in. And we can do that. But we can't do it on our own. We need each other. So let's figure out ways to make that happen. Hope the last days of 23 go well for all of you, and look forward to being with you again next week on Radio Tipping Point. And the rock feels no pain. And an island never cries. I will not bite. 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 Bite.